Hello everyone and welcome to another live game playthrough here on chess.com. We're going to see if we can get a good 15-minute with 10-second increment game going here. Continuing our kind of fix of our rapid rating. Rated 1823 at the start of this game. Let's go ahead and see if we can get a good game going at this point. So we have a game here against Mosatov. Let's go ahead and play knight f3 here. Rated 1870. So knight f3, knight f6. Let's go ahead and go c4. Kind of get our English opening, ready opening, however you want to kind of describe it here. Black goes for g6 here. I'm actually going to play a little bit of an interesting variation here against the King's Indian defense kind of setup. I'm actually going to go for b4 and bishop b2. Instead of playing d4, which would be a bit more of the normal King's Indian, if you go d4... if I go d4, knight c3, e4, something like that could be a normal King's Indian type of position. But I'm actually going to go for this kind of interesting bishop b2 line, where I'm kind of directly challenging the bishop that's on g7. I'm also not blocking the bishop with a pawn on d4, so there may be variations where these bishops trade off at some point. And I'm going to actually continue with a kind of a double fianchetto at this point. The nice thing about b4 compared to something like b3, for instance, is that the pawn on b4 gives me a little bit of a bigger advantage in the queenside space. So if black plays something like c5 or knight c6, I can play b5 and kick the knight around. Different things like that. Now, usually what black will do, since as they're playing the King's Indian defense, they're kind of used to this setup, usually black will go for something along the lines of d6 and e5 at some point. But there are certain ways that I can kind of combat this. Now that I haven't played d4, I will have ideas maybe of c5 at the right time to chip away at that pawn chain. So that'll be kind of an interesting option if black does that. If they instead go for like a c6, d5 setup, that's also playable. But the nice thing is, once again, I'll have this bishop unblocked. I'll play bishop g2. So this particular opponent looks like he's going for this c6, d5 kind of idea. So I'm just going to continue bishop g2. He'll probably go for d5, I imagine. And then I have some options there. Against d5, I don't want to let black just take the pawn for free. I think knight to a3 is a fine move here. It looks a little weird to put the knight on the side of the board at this point. However, I am protecting c4. If he takes, I'll take back. If this trade does end up occurring, that means I'll have two pawns in the center versus black's one. So that'll be pretty good. And a lot of times, if somebody does do this particular setup, they're usually not as familiar with this kind of c6, d5 route. I don't want to go d3, because then he could trade queens, and then rook d8 kicks my king around a little bit. So I'm going to go knight a3 and protect the pawn. If black goes a5, I'll go b5. And we might end up having some trades occur here at some point, if that did happen. But at the end of the day, I'm going to have, ideally, I'm going to have a situation where I have two central pawns versus black's one central pawn, if this trade occurs at some point. So the setup looks a little weird. I will say it's not your typical, not usually how white might play against the knight f6, bishop g7 kind of King's Indian setup, but definitely a fun way of playing here. I will probably castle, play d3 at the right time. Not going to play d4 anytime soon, just because that'll block the bishop in. But ideas of d3 and e4 to attack and put pressure on the center is an idea. I might also put the knight on e5, castle, and play f4. That might also be an option. Queen b3 is also a move that works in these positions. I could have even done queen b3 right away, but then the queen might get chased around a bit. But yeah, queen b3, castle, d3, rook c1, b5 at some point, knight e5, f4, oops. Just kind of putting the arrows and highlights on where like the general setup of the pieces are going to go. Of course, this all depends on black's setup as well. Now, there are some interesting situations here where, for example, if black plays something like knight d7, okay, they go queen b6. But I was going to say, if black goes something like knight d7 here, there is actually some case for doing this trade on d5. Because even though black will take back and kind of keep a pawn in the center, usually in that kind of setup, the knight doesn't want to be on d7. It usually wants to be on c6. So, the knight on d7 is kind of in the way there. I might have gone like rook c1, knight b5, put a knight on c7, some ideas like that. But this particular opponent goes queen b6, threatening the well, sorry, threatening the b4 pawn first. There are also knight e4 ideas. For example, if I just played like b5, knight e4 is actually pretty strong because he threatens mate as well as threatening my bishop. So I do have to kind of keep that, keep this idea in mind. I don't want to go c5, obviously, because he'll take b4. But what I could do is simply play queen b3, which I think is what I'm kind of leaning towards here. Queen b3, if he goes knight e4 there, then I'll just castle. If he wants to trade these bishops, that's fine. That would get rid of the bishop that's protecting his king at that point. So I would be generally okay with that kind of trade. Queen b3, if they take on c4, I'll do knight takes back and hit the queen. That's also fine. I also have ideas of bishop d4, kicking the queen out of b6. So queen b3 is looking pretty good. Queen b3, knight e4, I might also have, I might just take, or sorry, not take on b7. I can even play c5 if I wanted to in some situations. But I'm definitely leaning towards queen b3 here, just to guard the b pawn. I don't know if I want to play b5 here, because then something like pawn takes c4, knight takes, queen takes b5 is a bit messy. So I'm thinking queen b3. a5 is an option in those situations, which could be something black looks to do. I guess another idea here entirely... Oh, I'm sorry. I was going to say another idea here entirely is to take on d5. But then again, he still plays knight e4, threatening the mate, threatening the bishop, and that gets a bit messy. So... yeah, I think I'm leaning towards queen b3. Just kind of double checking here. Queen b3, a5 is a little bit annoying. But then I guess, like, worst case scenario, I could just take on a5. It's not the end of the world or anything like that. Yeah, I think we're going to go for queen b3. I don't really see another reasonable way to guard this. Bishop c3 just seems very odd. Knight e4 is still good there. Knight c2 is just very passive and loses the c4 pawn. b5, pawn takes c4 is a bit messy, so I'm going to go queen b3 here. Probably even thought way too long on that. I mean, it was almost a 3-minute think on queen b3 on a fairly normal move, but not a big deal. We're only about a minute behind on black's clock here. If he takes, I'll take back. If he doesn't really do anything here, I'll just castle. If he plays like bishop e6, I might even have knight g5. Hit the bishop. But leaning towards castling here, or bishop d4 would also come pretty soon. Maybe bishop d4. Bishop e6, bishop d4 could be an idea. In a lot of situations as well, bishop d4, queen b2 might be an idea to line up towards this bishop on g7, kind of making it harder for that knight on f6 to move away. And then maybe d3, e4, e5, stuff like that. So, knight e4 was a tactical threat, I will say. Kind of important after queen b6 to see this idea, threatening my bishop and the mate. But also attacking b4. So I think this protects b4, protects b2, and there's no like undefended stuff at this point. Knight e4 will just castle, like I said. His best move probably is a5, trying to chip away at the queen side, but I'm leaning towards just taking on a5. Knight a6 seems reasonable, going after the pawn. I think that's a perfectly good move. I think in this specific spot, I have to still be a little careful here. This pawn's a little tricky to keep protected. b5, the knight goes to c5, and then I can just go back to, like, c2. But then bishop f5, but then I have d3. It's not really too big of a deal. And then I also have bishop d4 and stuff like that coming at some point. So I don't think that's too much of a concern. So I'm leaning towards b5. b5 now is probably a little more reasonable because I'm threatening the knight. But he will go knight c5, I assume. And then queen to c2. And then bishop f5 and d3. If he takes on c4 there, then I'll do a little calculation. I could just play queen takes c4 back and protect b5. Black may be able to kind of attack my queen a little bit, but I also still have ideas of knight d4 hitting this bishop, bishop d4 pinning the knight when it's on c5, So I think I'll be okay. I'm going to get my queen kicked around a little bit. But I don't think it's too big of a deal. So knight c2 is also playable, but then pawn takes, queen takes, bishop e6, and again, the queen gets kind of harassed a bit. Even there, though, maybe queen h4, and the queen is just sitting fine over there. Knight g5 ideas, actually. That actually looks fine, too. Knight c2, though, that's not usually where the knight wants to go, I will say. The other option here is just to take on d5 first. And then if the knight takes back, then we'll just take on g2 and stuff like that, and then play b5. Or sorry, g7, then play b5. If the pawn takes back, then b5, knight c5. There is not pressure on the b5 pawn there. I could just almost go back to d1, actually. So do I take on d5 and then b5, or b5 first? b5 first, he also has pawn takes, queen takes, bishop e6, and then the pawn on b5 needs protection. That actually gets a little messy, actually, now that I say that. So I'm leaning towards pawn takes d5, actually. And then maybe knight c2 there. That might also be okay, but pawn takes d5 is what I'm leaning towards now. Yeah, I think we're going to go for that. If he takes on b4, I can simply... If he takes with the queen on b4, I'll just probably take on c6, and he'll end up with... I could even trade queens and then take on c6. He takes back. It would be even material, but again, at the end of the day, I'm going to have the 2 pawns in the center versus black's 1 pawn. So I'm not too concerned about that. If the pawn takes back, I'm leaning towards b5 or knight c2. Still have to make my mind up on that one. If the knight takes, I'm going to take on g7 first, and then probably play probably b5, I guess. If the knight goes to c5. Okay, it does take with the knight. So the nice thing going forward from here is that I'm going to have the 2 pawns in the center versus his 1 pawn. So I do have to solve the problem of the b pawn, but as the game progresses, I'll be able to play things like d4, e4, and have a big space advantage, I think. So I think I was leaning towards the trade on g7 first. This is just a general good idea because I can always play queen b2 or queen c3 check down the road. So yeah, I think I'm going to go for bishop takes g7 first here. The king will take back. Now, do I want a queen b2 check right now? Not necessarily. I kind of want to go b5, knight c5, then queen b2 check and see what happens. Then maybe queen d4 after that is a bit of an annoying pin for him. I have to do something about this pawn. If I go knight c2, he'll just take the pawn, and I think I'm just losing material. So I think I kind of have to play b5. I don't know if checking first and then playing b5 matters. Check, f6 maybe, b5. He might have knight c7 after that, and then the pawn's hard to guard because the queen's not protected. So I'm leaning towards b5 here. I'm assuming he'll play knight c5, and then queen b2 check. Probably queen b2 check. And then maybe even like rook b1, just to protect the pawn. And if the pawn takes, queen takes, that looks like it should be okay. Okay, so he does go to c5. I think the follow-up, of course, has to be queen b2. If I move anywhere else, it's a little awkward. This walks into like bishop e6 ideas, maybe. So I'm going to throw the check on. And then probably just rook b1. Probably just rook b1 after that. The thing with this bishop is it doesn't really have any great places to move. If it goes to e6 or f5, I have knight d4. If it goes to g4, I have knight e5. He goes back to g8, okay, so he didn't want to play f6 and be in that pin. I don't really want a castle, because then he can play a6, and now I actually can't do a good job of defending my pinned pawn there. So I think I kind of have to protect the queen here, or move the queen away. Knight c4 doesn't work because of queen takes b5, and then I'm just down a pawn. So I think rook b1 is kind of... rook b1, though, bishop f5. And then d3, bishop takes d3 is actually very messy. That's actually pretty annoying. But maybe after rook b1, bishop f5, then I have knight c4. And if the queen takes on b5, I do all those trades, and I think I'm okay. And if he instead does, if he moves the queen away somewhere and doesn't take on b5, he plays queen c7, then I can play just rook c1. And I think I'm okay there. And then I'll just castle next move. So I think that's what I'm leaning towards. Have to, have some calculation going on here a bit. Because rook b1, bishop f5, yeah, d3, bishop takes d3 would not be ideal, because a pawn takes knight takes d3 with the fork. So I think rook b1, bishop f5, knight c4. If he trades on b5, that's okay. If he moves the queen away, then I move the rook away, and that's not too big of a deal. So I think rook b1 is what we had in mind. If queen a5, I think again just knight c4, or take c6 and then knight c4. Bishop f5, knight c4 is important, and then move the rook away. So it's a little messy with the move order stuff here. That is why this b4 setup it can be a little tricky, a little tender, I would say. But as long as we kind of get out of these tactical problems, yeah, knight c4 was the response here, so we hit the queen first. As long as we can get out of these kind of tactical, things we have to watch out for in the opening. Once again, if I get the castle and play d3 and e4, or d4, or knight d4, as long as I just solve these problems really quick to start off with, I'm going to have the better position going forward. He's able to use his lead development and some piece activity to kind of give me a little bit of trouble at the start, but I don't think it's going to be enough, I would say. It's not a big enough deal. This is pretty important, I think, to hit the queen. Probably his best route is to do the queen trade and then play something like rook c8. But then I think I just castle, like I said, and then pretty soon the center pawns are going to start running up the board, which is going to be very nice for me. So either queen c7 or queen takes b5. Queen d8 really, I don't think, makes any sense. But queen c7 maybe is walking into the c file, which could be a little annoying for him, I guess. So I guess I could see some benefit of queen d8 if you don't want to be on the c file with the rook soon. So I'm sure he's calculating, do I do this or this? One of these retreat squares. I don't think there's any other forcing move. If he plays like knight a4 to hit my queen, I think I take his queen, he takes mine. I guess if I take the rook, he gets my rook. So maybe knight a4 is an idea, but maybe after knight a4 I just play like queen a3. And then I can also play d3 pretty soon after that. Yeah, I don't really think that does much. So he does do queen c7. d3, bishop takes d3 is still a big issue. I don't want to walk into the fork there. So I think I have to go rook c1. I got to move the rook, and I might as well line up towards the queen and the undefended knight. So I think that makes sense. If he plays something like bishop d3, I'm definitely not taking it either. I'd probably go like knight e5. Attack the bishop on d3, protect my knight. I can't do like castle because he'll take here. But knight e5 looks perfectly good after rook c1. So we'll move the rook away. If he takes here, probably going to take back with the queen. I'm trying to also see if maybe there's any other moves that work out. Maybe like knight e3. I don't know if that really works, though. Knight e3, he would just take it and then like get out of the pin and be fine. So I think take. If he ever tries like knight d3, pawn takes, bishop takes, I still have knight e5, I think. So pawn takes, queen takes, knight d3, pawn takes, bishop takes, knight e5. He does have queen takes e5, knight takes e5, bishop takes b5, bishop takes d5, because then the knight on d5 would be unprotected. I think I'm up a piece in that case with the queens off the board. I don't think that particular variation works. So I'm looking at this idea. If he doesn't do anything quickly, I'm just, like I said, I'm going to castle, and then there's no forks on d3 anymore. At least no forks on my, king and queen on d3 once the king's castled. And I can just go like d3, e4, or knight d4, or, you know, knight e5, attacking the knight on c5. I think if we just survive essentially the next 2 or 3 moves, we're going to have the better position, like I said. His king is weak. My bishop's pretty strong. The central pawns are going to go up the board. I'll have the open files towards the queen side. So it's kind of on black to act pretty quickly because I think I just have the better long-term position here. Even pawn takes b5, maybe knight d4 is kind of interesting as well. Because then he takes on c4, I take on f5, and then I play like bishop takes d5. And I'm going to get the pawn back on c4, but his pawn structure is going to be completely messed up. So pawn takes knight here with the idea of knight takes b5, as well as knight takes f5. That could also be an idea. I'm also opening up towards d5 there. I don't know if that's best, and it may not necessarily be. It may not be necessary to calculate when queen takes b5 is probably fine too, but pawn takes knight d4 could be an idea. If the bishop retreats, I take d5, pawn takes like rook takes or something like that. If that, I don't know, I'm leaning towards just based on time, not calculating all of that, just because I don't have a ton of time on the clock, and we've only played 15 minutes, or 15 moves in the game. But I'd probably look at that variation afterwards when we're doing the analysis after the game's over. So, Masatov thinking about his options. We're actually ahead on time now. I think we were down even like 3 minutes earlier, but now we're ahead on time. So we really had our longest think with the queen b3 and pawn takes d5 stuff. Those were both about almost 3-minute things. Everything since then has been about maybe an average of a minute or so. 30 seconds. I did 6 seconds on knight c4 because we already had that planned. A minute and a half on rook b1. 10 seconds on queen b2. You know, a bit lower in comparison for sure as the game progressed. So we're actually up almost about a minute here. And yeah, pawn takes b5. Yeah, I think I'll just do queen takes and castle. I think that's the what I'm leaning towards. So he does take on b5. I don't think there's anything I'm missing. Knight a3 is interesting with the idea of d4 being a threat. Even d4 is not a threat, though. He has queen a5. So, yeah, I think I'm just going to take on b5. I don't want to take too much time here and fall too far behind. So I think this is what I'm leaning towards. If he goes like a6, I'll just go back to b2. And then b5, I'll move the knight away somewhere. He's going to have to solve this this pin on the c file pretty soon. I'm not really threatening to move this just yet. If I go to like a3, he can go knight d3 check and then queen takes c1. Plays bishop d7. That's a little bit. I feel like that's a bit of a passive option here. So I have queen b2 or queen b1. Queen a5, he would just play b6, I think. I don't know if that really helps me much. b2 or b1. b2, knight a4. I'd probably end up going to b1 anyways, I guess. If I go straight to b1, bishop f5, then I just play d3, and I'm d3, queen a5, though, is a little annoying. But then knight d2. I'm probably going to just go to b2 first. b2, knight a4. I guess I also have queen a3 there. And then the rook is still protected, so I can move the knight away. Yeah, I'm going to go b2, I think. There's still no knight d3. I'll take that. If I can castle, okay, so he goes knight a4. I need to keep the rook protected. If I go to b3, he plays like b5, and then I lose the knight because of the pin. So I need to play one of these 3 moves. I don't really want to go into that because then he'll trade queens. Queen a1 is probably okay as well, honestly, to keep on this open file, and then I can castle next, and I'm protecting the rook. Like I said, queen b1. Well, bishop f5 doesn't work because I have e4. I think that's fine for me. So queen b1, probably like rook c8, but then I just castle. And I think I'm fine there. Yeah, I think I'm going to go queen b1, actually. Though I'm not really sure if it matters a ton at the end of the day. I think queen a3, queen a1, and queen b1 are all fine. Bishop f5, though, e4 is the answer for that. Not d3, because then, you know, knight c3 is maybe... knight c3, move, b5, something like that could be annoying. Okay, so he's threatening b5 here because my rook would be unprotected. I think I gotta just castle. I've been wanting to castle for a while anyways. I could do, like, knight e5, I guess, protect my knight and hit his knight, but... He also has knight b6 as an idea, so, like, knight e5, knight b6. Yeah, I think I'm just gonna castle. Like, there's no need to get fancy here. If he goes b5, now my rook on f1's protecting, so now I'm threatening, like, knight e5. The queen moves, and then I can win the bishop pair. So he has to watch out for, like, that kind of idea. He also needs to keep the b7 pawn protected, so he can't go to, like, d8 and lose the pawn, I don't think. So queen b8 is playable, but then probably still, like, knight e5. I can also go e4. Queen b8, e4, knight moves, d4, and just have this huge space advantage in the center. Like I said earlier, that's kind of one of the ideas behind this particular variation. It's a little weird that I haven't moved any of my central pawns by move 19. I am kind of breaking that opening principle of, you know, put your pawns in the center, control the center. But that doesn't mean it's not ever going to happen. We are able to get rid of his d5 pawn, and now we're going to have the pawns rolling in the center of the board pretty soon. So like I said, as long as we survive those, you know, a couple of situations within the past 5 moves or so where things get a little tricky, or actually within the last, I guess, like 8 moves, because he did play, you know, knight c5 and bishop f5 and stuff like that. But as long as we survive this, I think we're just, it's just a bit easier to play our position. Undefended, this knight on a4 looks a little silly. E4, d4, knight e5, bishop takes, you know, here. If the queen goes to b8, I guess even just bishop, knight e5 right away, bishop e6, you know, e4, d4. That's probably what I'll lean towards doing, something like that. Or queen b8, like I said, e4, knight moves, d4. That seems perfectly good as well. Knight e5 right now is the threat, though, because then I'll pick up the bishop pair. So I think queen b8 is, I wouldn't really say forced, but it feels like queen b8 to avoid the c-file stuff is kind of important to do here. We're up 2 minutes now, so that's nice. We're not really in any kind of time scramble situation here. So notice how we kind of, I think an important thing that we did throughout the course of this game, even all the way back from the opening phase, is that we had like a game plan for what we were going to do as the game progressed. The idea is to trade off the C and D pawns, eventually have the pawns on E2 and D2 ready to go in the center soon, control the C file, queen on B3, which, you know, ended up going back to B2 and B1. Knight on A3 got into C4. We had this kind of goal or setup that we were aiming towards from the opening. And now that we've got it on the board, now that we're castled, like I said, as long as we survive those couple of moves and stuff like that, we're just in a better position here. Definitely not winning, but definitely I'd probably say, you know, a bit of an advantage, or at least a slight advantage to white. So we're up about 3 minutes now, which is the time situation is getting more imbalanced at this point. Bishop c6, interesting. So I don't know if bishop c6 is too good, because I think I just go... Either I go knight d4 and hit the bishop, or I just go like this knight to e5, either knight to e5, probably this c knight, and then I can just take the bishop and the because of the pin, and plus black will end up with some isolated pawn on c6. I kind of like moving this knight more, though, because I do want to open up this diagonal. If I go to e5, there is the threat of maybe just taking. I don't know. Let's see. Hold on here. If we go knight e5, are we threatening bishop takes and then move this knight somewhere? Not really. There's nowhere great this knight can move. If I move away, he takes on e5. Knight d4. And then take here. I mean, I think all of these moves are good. Even just e4. Well, e4, I guess he goes to f6, and then I have to guard the pawn. But that should even be fine, too. d4, well, d4 is knight c3. d4, knight c3 is a little annoying. Yeah, I think I'm just going to go knight e5 or knight d4. I kind of want to move this knight, like I said, so I can... I'm leaning towards e5 just because it's a little more active. And then I can play d4 if I want to support the knight. So I think I'm going to go this way. This is a position where there's really no need to like think for so long. I probably, again, didn't need to think for a minute and a half here. Because it's just, you know, it's just how do I put it? It's just a position where I can just make some general improvements. Now I can just win the bishop pair, or not bishop pair, sorry. I can have the only bishop on the board. Even bishop h3 ideas maybe at some point. I'm threatening maybe like take, like, I don't know, knight b2, hitting the queen and the knight. I don't think I have any major threats to win material, because even if this was gone, there's not any great discoveries available. But, for example, one of the nice things about the knight on e5 is if he goes to b8, I can actually do bishop takes d5, bishop takes knight d7, forking the queen and the rook. So that's actually a benefit of e5 compared to the d4 square. So queen b8 looks reasonable to get off of the c file. But then, yeah, queen b8, bishop takes d5, and then knight d7. Even there, though, queen a8, I take the rook, he takes on c4. I guess I would just go like d3 and then knight d7. Yeah, that should be fine. He's only got about a minute left, too, which is getting himself into some really drastic time problems. So he goes e6. I don't even necessarily know if I want to take this, quite honestly. It might not even be necessary to take it. Because if I take, the pawn takes back. And that's, I mean, that's obviously still good for me. If I go e4, let's say I don't take it, for example. e4, knight f6. Queen b4 is an idea? Maybe? Because then knight d6 would be a threat. d4, knight c3 is a little annoying. I don't want to go d4 yet. I want to kick the knight and then play d4 if I'm going to do that. So even e4 and knight moves d4 is... that also looks pretty good. Yeah, I don't really know. I'm sure there's probably one way of doing this that's ideal. I mean, taking here and then playing e4, knight b6 maybe. e4, knight b6, does that really do anything? Not really. I can still just play d4. Yeah, I think I'm just going to go for e4. I'm just going to kind of leave the pressure on him. b5 is never a threat because I can just take on the c6. And then queen takes and move the knight somewhere. So if he goes back to e7 or b6 or really anywhere, I'm just going to play d4, I think. And then I might have ideas of d5. Kick the bishop and see if I can do something over there. Yeah, probably just knight moves, d4, rook d1, and then queen b4. Might as well try to get all my pieces in the game. This rook on f1, for example, is not in the game yet. And he's only got 25 seconds. There is a 10-second increment, so he'll get 10 extra seconds right there on his clock, but I think we're just at a... he's probably just going to end up losing on time at some point here. d4, is there anything to do with b5? Well, no, I don't think so. I think I still just take on c6 or play knight e3. Bishop takes, queen. Yeah, that doesn't work. d4. Can you do bishop takes e4? Bishop takes, knight takes, queen takes b5. I don't think that works. I think I just moved the knight. He can get the queen for 2 rooks, but then I still have I still have 2 knights on the board. Yeah, I think we're just gonna go d4. I think that was the plan. We're protecting this. We did e4 first before d4 because now there's no knight c3. And I'll just play rook d1 or rook e1. Probably rook d1 just to guard this. And then like queen b4, d5. I could even go queen b3, f3 maybe. That's going to walk into the capture on e4. He's only got 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3. He's just going to lose on time, it looks like. Okay, he does play a move last second. Plays a6. If I go d5, pawn takes, bishop takes, or, knight takes. Bishop takes. I have a discovered attack, but I don't, again, have anywhere great to move the knight to. d5, take. Knight b2. He has queen a5 to guard the knight, or queen... Yeah, queen a5 guards the knight. I think we'll just continue improving. Just rook d1. I don't think there's a tactic. I mean, I could take on c6, pawn takes back, and then like knight e5. That also looks good. I mean, there's really nothing wrong with that at all. Queen b4 actually was one of my other ideas, going for knight d6. Let's go queen b4, I think. He has queen b4, bishop b5 is a little annoying. Okay, we're going to go rook d1. Bishop b5 would only be annoying because then if my knight moves, he gets 2 rooks for the queen. So we're now threatening d5. Okay, bishop b5. I think I can just move the knight anywhere now. And if I move the knight, he has knight c3, I guess, which is a little annoying. So maybe just queen... A little awkward, I will say. Queen b4 back to e1 even. Looks odd, but playable. I'll go back to e1, that way the rook's protected, and then if he takes on c4, I'll just take back with the rook. If I took with the knight, he'd have b5, but if I take with the... I also have queen takes a4, but yeah, if he moves... I wasn't really threatening anything yet, but now I have knight d6, I think. Knight d6 forks the rook, the rook and the bishop. I think we'll do that. He's probably going to trade rooks. Queen e7 pins my knight, which is a little tricky, but then I can just move queen a3, threatening knight takes b5. Rook c8 isn't really a threat yet, but knight takes f7, rook takes f7, then rook c8 is a threat. Knight takes b5 is also a threat. Okay, bishop to c6. I think I just take here on c6. Pawn takes, queen takes a4, queen takes d6, e5, forking the 2 pieces. So if I take here, he takes here, and then e5 fork stuff. I could also just go e5 first, and then this knight's going to be lost. I don't really know if the move order matters that much. We'll just do it this way. Rook takes c6, and this knight's also trapped. Maybe that's even better. But again, with the time situation, I'm just going to just do this here. This is protected by the queen. Again, no need to calculate the absolute best move if I have a variation that's just going to win a piece here. Queen e7, take. I'll take on c6. Yeah, he ends up resigning, so we win the game here. Okay, so let's go ahead and analyze this one here. Good game to my opponent. He definitely played tough. He did put a lot of pressure on me in the opening. However, like I said, this is the type of opening where I might be under some pressure at the beginning, but once I get those pawns in the center rolling, then it's pretty smooth sailing there. So knight f3, knight f6, c4, g6. The typical moves here against the King's Indian are d4, knight c3, e4, sometimes even g3 and bishop g2 if you want to go that route. So I go for b4 though, which is just a kind of a sideline to a degree. Bishop b7, bishop b2, or sorry, bishop g7, bishop b2, castle g3. Black goes c6, bishop g2, d5. We go knight a3. Taking on d5 is also okay as well, but I think knight a3 is fine. If you put this in the computer, it's probably going to say that black is slightly better. It probably doesn't give white much of an advantage in this situation, but that's according to the computer. You're not playing against a computer during the game. You're playing against a human. The thing is that these are just kind of interesting positions. They may not be, objectively the absolute best way to play, but they're not bad to play either. They're just they're kind of just different, I guess is the word I'd use. So queen b6, queen b3, knight a6. I was leaning towards b5 at first, but I think this does walk into that problem of knight c5, queen moves, bishop f5, d3, pawn takes b5. Pawn takes c4 probably also even works. The idea being knight takes, queen takes, and I'm just down a pawn. I guess I do have knight d4. I do get some compensation, but, I am down a pawn. So I didn't really want to go into that. So that's why I made the trade on d5 first, which I think is kind of important. If he had taken back with the pawn, maybe looking at it more, I probably wouldn't go b5 because there's no need to give the knight the active square. I'd probably just go knight c2. Bishop f5 threatening to take here, then the pawn, d3. And then this knight is looking a little silly on a6. It might go back to c7 just like my knight here. But I can now start advancing on the queen side, castle, knight d4. Black has a little more central space. I have more queenside space. His queen is also a target that I could maybe attack here. So that looks fine for me. I think I'd be happy with that. So he took with the knight, which I think is probably the better option because it puts a little bit more pressure on my position. So take, b5, knight c5, we check, move. I went ahead and played rook to b1. I think if I just castle, I was thinking black would just go a6. And now how do I guard the pawn? If I go knight c4, he takes. I mean, maybe I could do something like this and threaten to maybe trap the queen, but I mean, I don't know if I necessarily. You could play queen a4. Queen a4, I mean, maybe I can kick this knight and go knight b6. This could be interesting, I guess, but again, I'm not really playing this opening to necessarily sacrifice a pawn, so I think rook b1 is okay. Another option here, which I didn't really think about during the game, is maybe just moving this knight so that he can't take on b5. So something like this actually looks pretty good. He can't take here because I'll take the knight. And I'm also threatening this knight going to c4. So if he does bishop somewhere, knight c4, queen c7, this also looks perfectly fine for me. So maybe this knight e5 to c4 option is a little more active, I guess. This puts me under a little pressure at the moment. Knight c4, I think, is forced. I do think his best route is to take on b5, like I said during the game. I think if he had done something like this, I'd probably go ahead and just castle, I guess, or maybe knight d4. But at least compared to the game, he has the queen off the board. There's a little bit less pressure on his position. I have to be a bit careful. Stuff like this could be, not so great for me because my knight and my rook are hit. So yeah, that was probably his best route. I think I'm probably still okay here. Maybe instead of moving back, there's not a lot of great squares to go to. Maybe rook a5 is the move. And I'm kind of keeping this pin. If he moves the knight, I take on d5. But I don't know. I mean, this could be. I don't know. I mean, maybe this is probably still fine for me, but it's a little messier than compared to the game for sure. So when he goes queen c7, though, I did play rook c1, line up towards the queen. He takes on b5. I was looking at this idea of knight e5, I think, but like I said, I don't really think this is necessary. No need to, get messy. I think it's just simpler to take back on b5. Queen back to b2. I went queen to b1. Queen e5 actually looks pretty good. Queen d4 also looks fine. Queen b1 seems a little passive in comparison now that I look at it. I castle. But yeah, I think bishop c6 is probably where his real mistake was made. I think maybe, like I said, maybe queen b8, but then this still looks strong. If he goes bishop e6, I can do this this fork on d7. So that seems okay. What else would he do here? Maybe there's this idea. I definitely didn't look at this during the game. Maybe there's this idea of like knight c3, trying to cut off the connection of my rook to the knight. I take here. He takes here. I take b7. Hitting the bishop. I'm hitting the pawn. Rook c7. Queen maybe b4. Knight takes c3. Yeah, this could be a bit messy. I don't know if I'm super crazy about this position. Black looks like he has a lot of activity here. So yeah, this knight c3 move is actually kind of an interesting one. Knight c3 in this position here looks like maybe Black's best bet, I would say. Bishop c6 though, I wasn't a fan of this because knight e5. Maybe the other knight was better, but I did knight e5. He goes e6. We kick the knight, and then we go d4. Yeah, I mean this just feels like a very pleasant position. a6. Rook to d1, bishop b5. I don't know. I was thinking maybe I could take here. If the b pawn takes, actually, if the b pawn takes, the knight's just trapped, isn't it? Yeah, I should have considered that a bit more. If the queen takes e5, knight d5, knight d6. Yeah, this is also just looking very good. If the knight goes to c3, you move the queen. The rook's hit. Bishop takes d5 is an idea. If he goes rook c7, you just take here. And then there's problems with the knight on c3. I guess if you could do e takes. But I mean, maybe just like rook c2, rook c1. It's a bit tough to deal with that pinned knight. But yeah, I think maybe that was maybe I could have improved there a little bit. But I think even right here, I mean, queen b4, queen d8, knight d6. This just looks really strong. Maybe knight b6 to attack the pinned piece a bit more. Yeah, that might have been a bit messy, because then I have to now guard the knight. If I go bishop f1, he might take on e4. Okay, so I mean, we were both kind of low on time here. Maybe I could have played a little bit more accurately, but I think once I get the knight on d6, and then I'm just winning material here. And we're going to win a piece and win the game. So, kind of an interesting game here. My opponent did have a bit of counterplay for sure in the opening phase. But once we were able to kind of untangle our pieces and get the pawns in the center, we definitely get the advantage. So I think this is a game where it's really important from the opening, from the start of the opening, that you want to have a kind of blueprint for how the opening is going to go. You may not be able to guarantee exactly what happens, but you want to have like an idea of what your opening is looking to accomplish, and then how you're going to make that happen as the game goes along. So from the start of the game, I was already talking about things like trading off pawns on the queen side, having two pawns in the center versus Black's one pawn. We were talking about using the c-file. We were talking about this exchange of bishops. All the things I was kind of talking about, a good chunk of them at least, ended up kind of occurring in the game. So that's how I kind of already had some ideas of what might happen, and that helps me to plan out the remaining parts of the game a bit better. So when it did, kind of end up coming to fruition, I had the two pawns in the center in a very nice position. And that's how we were able to get a good advantage at this point. So anyways, though, we got the win here. We are now at a rating of 1862. We started off at about, I think it was 1553, so we've picked up about 300 points throughout the course of the video so far. But yeah, so hopefully you guys enjoyed this game. I will see you around in the next video. Make sure that you like the video, give it a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel if you enjoyed the content, ring the bell notification so that you can get more updates when the next video goes live, and I'll see you in that next video then. All right, everybody, have a good rest of the day. Bye-bye.